Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soul Seekers podcast, where we believe that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure, as we share our mission of mentorship is conservation. To learn more about everything we do, check out our show on Carbon TV or go to soulseekersnation.com. Freedom on, everybody, and stay soulful. This podcast is proud to be brought to you by the Crazy Elk Company. Go to crazyoutcompany.com to pick up yourself a tag wallet, custom kill kit, or one of their e-tag systems to throw in your pack this coming hunting season. Use the code SOULFUL with a capital S to save 20% at checkout. This podcast is also proudly brought to you by OnX Hunt. When I first got into hunting, I kept hearing all about public land and different access and how to find different locations to hunt. I was like, well, how are people even identifying all this stuff? Well, sure enough, I came across the number one hunting GPS app, and that is OnX Hunt. If you guys want to get better at hunting and go deeper into your scouting, OnX Hunt is the number one GPS app for that. Join the millions of hunters who trust OnX Hunt to find more game, discover new access, and hunt smarter. It was a game changer for me, and I know it's going to be a game changer for you if you've never used it. If you have used it, you know the power that it holds. Guys, I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you want to know more about OnX, go to onxmaps.com/hunt and check out their app. Be blessed, freedom on, and stay soulful. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soul Seekers podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack, and today's episode is diving into a topic that is going to be impactful for every listener all over the United States and where you're from, because we have the founder of a online platform called Season Report that covers all sorts of different things. It would be considered like a modern almanac for the entire ecosystem around you. You know, whether you hunt, whether you are a forager, whether you need to garden and figure out when you need to plant and harvest and all of that. Season Report is for every single person, and you can benefit from this whether or not you currently hunt, forage, or garden, or you plan on it. And so we are bringing on Kris from Season Report to talk all about his journey and what's led him to where he is today in the creation of Season Report, and for all of you to be able to take away from this podcast and apply it today to your life and your plans for the rest of 2022 and for coming up at 2023. So without further ado, Kris, my man, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, dude, it's an absolute pleasure. So one of the things that I love is chatting with fellow school teachers, because I feel like, there's a very select few, at least on the West Coast where I come from, of school teachers that are hunters and school teachers that are like full on outdoor lifestyle. And here you are, a school teacher, man. How many years have you been teaching?
This is going on my 9th or 10th year. I should probably know that. It's significant, but 9th or 10th year. Yeah.
It's like when you hit your 30s and 40s, you stop remembering actually how old you are. So
yeah, I tell my students after 25, you can rent a hotel room, you can rent a car. The number doesn't matter.
Right, exactly. I love it. All right, so Kris, where are you from? What are you currently doing? You just had a brand new baby 2 weeks ago. Congratulations, brother.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, I live in Virginia currently. I've moved all over the country. My family moved all over, mostly Colorado, Louisiana, but I'm currently in Virginia. I've been here for about a little over 10 years. And this is, having lived all over the country, man, I really enjoy the Appalachian Mountains. You get all 4 seasons, and the hunting is so unique. You can go down to the Tidewater, you can go to the flatlands, you can go up into the mountains. If I could live anywhere, it'd probably be right around here.
Really?
Yeah.
So you've been teaching, you said, for like 8 or 9 years. Is that all in Virginia?
Yes.
Okay. So my follow-up question, answer this all in one if you don't mind, is when did you start your hunting career? And then you said you've lived like all over the place. So have you fallen in love with where you are at for hunting as well, not just the beauty of it?
That's a big part of it. Yeah. So when I was about 5 to 10 years old, we lived in Colorado, middle of nowhere in the mountain ranges. in the southern part of the state, and it was, I mean, 5 to 10 year old boy living out there with the Rocky Mountains in your backyard. It's just it was the perfect place to grow up, and so we we were fortunate enough to live near a wildlife sanctuary where they took care of wounded and smuggled animals, and they would rehab bears and mountain lions, and reintroduce them into the ecosystem. And this was all by the Colorado Fish and Game Agency funding, and it was really cool just to be part of that ecosystem, but then kind of see a side of conservation that people don't really see of taking those fawns whose mom got hit on the highway and raising them up, reintroducing them into the ecosystem so where they can kind of have a healthy life. A lot of times they would have mountain lions where people would find cubs and bring them home thinking they have pets, and then a year later they have this killing machine indoors, and they call 911, and they please get this cat out. So this facility was a place where you'd bring those types of animals and get them rewilded and reintroduced out into the mountains. And so I think conservation has been part of my life from the very beginning. And then I went hunting out there a few times with my dad, and it was incredible. I never got anything out there, but just hiking out on those trails and setting up in a nice overlook, and you could choose a different valley each day because there was almost limitless options. So it really instilled my love of the mountains and outdoors. And then from there, we moved southeast to Texas and Louisiana and stuff. And down there, it's just such a different topography. It's flat. It's hot. I also entered high school and college years where being in the woods was the least interesting thing in the world. I wanted to go and do all the things kids normally do,
Right.
and so I didn't. So I didn't really visit the woods that much. I didn't hunt. I fished occasionally down in Texas and Louisiana, and then bounced around a little bit, and then came to UVA for grad school out here in Virginia. And being here and having such close access to Shenandoah National Park, all of a sudden rekindled that love of hiking and getting out in the mountains that I hadn't had for probably 10 years of living in flatland. And that just really started me getting outdoors. All of a sudden, we're camping a lot more, trying different trails. And I mean, you lived out west, so you know the whole thing. Like, let me try this different trail that I've never done before. And so, living a much more active outdoor lifestyle. And then, as I shifted from scientific research that was pretty demanding at all times, and I switched into teaching, I suddenly had more time, and so we got outside even more. And I had the great fortune of meeting a good friend who offered that I could go hunt on their land. And I was like, all right, I haven't done that in probably 20 years. I'll go try it. And I went out there, and it was like as soon as I got in the stand, it clicked. I'm like, oh, this is everything that I enjoyed from my childhood. I just have it's like I had a blinder on for a long time. And then I got a deer and started eating it, and kind of off to the races ever since then. It's just every year I'm doing more and more, going from venison to hog to black bear, expanding into foraging much more. And then we always grew up with a garden, but just filling out that dinner table with everything personally sourced as much as I can.
I truly am fascinated by people that take the route of like the scientific approach of getting into hunting. So,
Mhm.
was your dad a hunter?
Yes, not a big one. He was when he was a kid, but when I was a kid in their house, we went a few times, but not really.
Yeah. So you were raised in a house that was open to hunting,
Mhm.
promoted it, whether or
Mm,
not like it was, hey, we're gonna go do this type thing all the time.
certainly.
But and then you go on your journey, you sow your wild oats, you discover who you are, you discover kind of identity of what you want, and that leads you through the scientific view. You have these glasses on and how you're viewing the world through a scientist lens, which is
Mhm.
always cause and effect, cycles of life.
Exactly.
You gotta have different studies of a blinded study, a double blinds, like all this different stuff. And so, do you take that mindset when you're applying it to hunting? And it's like, or the outdoors, like oh, well, this is exactly why this is happening because they'd only take this path during this time of year and this path on this time of year. And like, is that how you view hunting when you're out in the field?
Absolutely. And I would also say that, the more I do it and the more hunters I speak to, I realize that everybody's a scientist at heart. Every hunter has noticed those patterns of seasonality. And I think scientists and hunters, while they might not think that they are alike, they're almost the exact same. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt was a scientist by going and getting out in the woods and trying to identify and catalog as many species as possible, right?
Right.
So I think they're pretty closely related.
I love that. Uh, so so tell me about this. You go. How did you get access to some person's land? And were you already like? Was it like hopping back on a bike where you're like I already know how to ride and what to do, or was there this giant learning curve or reteaching yourself, or the term that you said earlier, which I love from Jess Caldwell, who has been a former guest on this podcast. She talks about rewilding herself.
Mm. Yeah.
So was there this like rewilding of you getting back out into nature?
So it wa- it's been a pretty powerful transformation from a. So I was doing DNA research for years, studying how different genes turn on and off in response to different stimuli. And so when you're in that field and you're surrounded by so many people who are living a similar life that is not really out in nature, you're ironically studying the most intimate parts of nature and how the ecosystem actually works, but you're not in it. Uh, it was shifting from that to getting outdoors was pretty transformative, and I started getting weird looks from fellow scientists. And you're doing what? Why wouldn't you go to the store where it's been raised and you know put through a USDA check and
Yeah.
all that stuff? Like, why would you go
Quote
get a
unquote safe. It's
ex-
safe.
exactly? And I tell my students that I went to grad school to understand on a deep level that on a DNA level that everything your mom told you was right. Like, you got to get outside, exercise, eat healthy. And so as I learned more about genetics, I found that I was reading more about history,
Uh-huh.
and those two were really were overlapping. And I realized, oh, I think we are living. My epiphany was kind of we're living in this really small period of time where we have access to so much information, and we believe a lot of it's good, all of it's well intentioned, but we've created this atmosphere where we believe that nature is more dangerous than it is. But in reality, for the longest amount of time as we've been walking around this planet, this is how things were. And I think it's been one of those kind of an awakening of getting out in the nature more and more. And so to take your question, going into the woods with the scientific lens, I think the biggest part of science that still I'm thinking about every time I go out in the woods is it comes at the dinner table. And so I've been really fascinated with getting back into the chemistry of things. I've been really hooked on making bone broth the last few years in various different recipes, different temperatures, and experimenting that way. When I'm going out foraging and getting berries, like distilling the essence of that fruit down into a syrup or a jam, that part is really fascinating to me these last few years.
There is so much knowledge and history that people don't hold on to. And
Mhm.
so many people, I this is a broad, general, sweeping statement, which I typically like to stay away from. But from my perspective, everyone loves to think that they're the smartest person, and yet they don't know shit. and and I say that in a funny term, like literally they don't know shit because you could take them out into the woods and they couldn't identify the poop that they find. Like
Exactly.
they couldn't say what animal that is or what's around them, or we're so reliant on technology to give us answers.
Yep.
Hey Siri, what's this? Hey Alexa, what's this? Hey, blah blah blah. It's like, how come you can't just go outside and stop and look up into the stars at night, look around you, look at your feet touching the ground. I totally believe in earthing, grounding yourself.
Oh yeah.
And like the whole mother nature and the way it's self-healing. This world is
Hmm.
self-healing. It wouldn't have been able to last as long as it did if there weren't the tricks and the trades and the knowledge and the know-how out in this world. And yet people like to say, oh, I know it all. It's like, yeah, but experiences really trump book knowledge.
They, oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the meat suit that we're operating with
Yes.
is very, very old, right? It's operating. It was built and operates in a much more natural experience than a more sterile modern experience.
Yeah, totally. See, this is what I'm really fascinated by you so far, Kris, is excuse me, is a part of this podcast is our creed is transforming lives through primal adventure. I didn't know if you knew that or not about this podcast, but this idea that we are transforming lives. We transform our lives and those of others through the mentorship and the knowledge that we share in order for the conservation to last and hunting to last for generations to come. And you are a guest that's using the term, oh man, hunting was very transforming for me and it renewed my soul. And I'm like, come on, baby. Like, I'll set him up. You knock him down, and let's make this an epic podcast.
I like it. I like it.
So talking about this meat suit and you saying we're made, we're not necessarily made for a sterile environment. You reminded me of this saying that I'm sure all you listeners and you are very familiar with is rub some dirt on it. Hey, why don't you just go rub some dirt on it? And it made me think about, like, where does that saying come from? Like, sayings always have meanings, like don't throw the
Right.
baby out with the bathwater, or the rule of thumb, or there's all these like true, like, holy smokes, that was what they did back then, and like rub some dirt on it. A lot of the times is back in the day they didn't have band-aids or bandages or whatever, and so they go rub some dirt on a wound to have a clay-like effect and have it be a bandage.
Yep.
And I'm like, dude, yes, get tough, get dirty. So my family, we just moved to the state of Texas from Washington, and you talking about this idea of like mountains and topography changes and all this stuff. I'm down here in Texas and I see horizons. Like, dude, the sunrise and the sunset every night is pure fire. It's
it's very
the
beautiful.
best thing you ever seen. And yet, where I come from in the state of Washington, there's places where I could stop and just look and see Mount Rainier just tower above everything else. And I look out on the horizon, there's some times that's brought some tears in my eyes because I miss that. Now, at the same time, and in transition to the other half of what I was going to say, is we grew up in a state that had full of trees. Trees everywhere, but my house and my neighborhood and my property didn't have trees. And being a father of 3 young boys, I'm like, guys, go get dirty, go scrape your knees, go climb a tree, go do stuff like that. And my oldest son, he goes, but Dad, we don't have any trees. And I was like,
good argument.
I was like, so ironically, we moved to Texas and we have 2 trees on our property, and they're like, oh, we have trees to climb.
Nice.
Going full circle, this idea that we are meant to be outside. It's healthier for us, just like across mind, body, spirit, soul, the alignment, talking about grounding ourselves and the connection to nature. You've studied genes. You've done the scientific research into, the foundation of humanity and how it interacts with other things. What are some of the biggest takeaways that have led you to like these aha moments or like these creeds, statements that you could say overarching about hunting or yourself or the transforming power it's led you to experience?
That's an interesting question. I think to keep it genetic, when you do something, when you exercise, when you eat sugar, like literally everything you do is sending a signal into your body. That signal bounces from protein to protein to protein. Eventually, it gets down to your DNA and it turns on or off different genes. Everything is changing at all times, and it's constantly responding to the stimuli you provide your body. That's why you can be a couch potato for a few months and lose muscle mass and get fat, because your body's responding to the everything you're putting it through, and vice versa. If all of a sudden you get off the couch and start working out hard, after about a month, you're going to notice some big changes. And so I think from a genetic perspective, those feedback loops are pretty powerful, and those are kind of those aha moments where I never had anybody ask this question. It's an interesting one, but when a signal comes in, it has a destination, but it also branches off and reinforces other destinations on a cellular level. And so something beneficial for you, like getting out in the sun and receiving some UV, or what I did was skeletal muscle research. So if you exercise, you lift a weight or you go run, you're insulting that muscle, and that insult is causing a cascade of responses that go. Some of them go to your muscle to reinforce, because hey, this crazy guy operating is probably going to do this to us again. We should get stronger for next time. But you're also sending out signals that enter your bloodstream and go to your brain and help you think clearer. And there's at UVA, they're above every gym. And interestingly, a lot of the college students can use this to their advantage whenever they're making their schedules. There was a quote from Thomas Jefferson that said something to the point like, you're wasting everything if you're not getting exercise for 2 hours a day. And, that's a quote that's timeless. It's not talking about science, but when you look at a genetic and biological level, he's right, because that exercise is doing so much for the body in the muscle, liver, brain, everything. And so I think just appreciating the power of a good habit and a healthy ecosystem and all the ways it reinforces itself has been one of those pretty powerful aha moments as I've gotten deeper and deeper into appreciating the ecosystem and eating from it.
Oh man, I love that. You just had me. I like to always be able to pull up stuff during podcasts, and so I was like, all right, what did he actually say about exercise? And just quickest quote says, encourage all your virtuous dispositions and exercise them whenever an opportunity arises, being assured that they will gain strength by exercise as a limb of the body does, and that exercise will make them habitual. I don't know if that's the quote that you were referring to.
He's big. He was big in exercise. There's a few of them. There's one specifically about 2 hours, but I mean, the one you just read hit the nail on the head. You do positive things and they become positive habits.
Yeah. It's so interesting, and I want to collect my words on this because the concept of life coaching is very big. I feel like as of late, and there's a need for that in society because we have, I would say, grown soft, grown weak, grown distant from our primal roots, our primal identity of how we operate, of what is actually healthy for us. And with that being said, it's truly fascinating where all this comes down to, and I think part of why hunting is so transformative is because it causes you to have some sort of purpose, routine, ritual, or like grounding of like, this is why I do what I do. This is a purpose driven life. I am waking up early to exercise so that I can be at my top peak performance in the woods when I'm hunting animals and taking someone's life or something's life. Like it is literally chain events. Exactly what feedback cycle of what you're talking about is like, you want to be at the top of your game, then do this, which will then lead you to a habitual life, which will then take you to the top of your game, which will then, and it just keeps going and going. And then the minute that we get out of habits, our habitual lifestyle, a positive habitual lifestyle,
Right.
very important to
Yeah.
denote right there, is the minute that all of a sudden it feels like our world's crumbling.
Right.
People feel lazy or depressed, or I don't know, you name it. It just run the whole gamut, because now all of a sudden we're creatures of habit, and it's like, what do I do? I think, and that's the difference between a leader and a follower, right? Is the person that can say, no, I'm going to lead my life. I'm not going to just be the follower of my existence and let, I'm going to put a rudder down on my ship and say, nope, this is where we're going, rather than letting the water take us wherever we end up going.
Certainly. And I think I don't share hunting specifically in my classroom, but I do share all of my knowledge about the ecosystem as much as I can. And I bring my eighth graders out into the mountains for a trip every year. I've been doing that as long as I've been there, and being able to impart that knowledge on people who have never really been off of pavement. Some of them have never been off of pavement. It's pretty eye opening to see how transformative that can be. And there's one kid I remember, we were driving out, and the place we go, you get not just off of the onto a gravel road, like you actually have to cross a river. It's awesome. It's my favorite part of the state of Virginia. And when we hit a road that didn't have paint anymore, he comes up to the front of the bus. He's like, Mr. Chain, are we allowed to be on this road? It's like, what do you mean on this road? There's a sign right there. He's like, but there's no paint. And I was shocked. He could not remember a time he had been off of a road that wasn't clearly marked. And I said, wait till we hit the gravel, bud. You're in for quite a surprise. And so we get there, and after it's a 3-day trip every year. And after I helped him catch his first fish, he was really shocked. He's like, I've never been fishing. You can just do this. And then it's like, yeah, and you're welcome to throw it back. You're welcome to, I'll help you cut it up, and you can eat your very first fish if you like. And he was unsure of himself because it was also brand new, and he thought about it for a few minutes, and he came back, I would like to eat this. And guiding him through that process of, dispatching the fish and cleaning it and prepping the meat, and then that transformation when it went from animal to something he did recognize on a plate, he was over the moon, asked all about how to get a fishing license. And now every time I see him, he's like, oh man, look at this fish that I caught last weekend. It's awesome.
Dude, beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I love that. You are making a difference in this world. And it's really interesting, is like, fish don't close their eyes, right? So
Right.
when you look at a dead fish, it looks the same alive as it does dead. There's no difference. Mammals close their eyes, and so when you see something big and living, and it's like, oh, it's so beautiful, but now that's a steak on my plate, or a hamburger, or and like people have this weird removal of the transition of it in the wild to you consuming it on a plate. I think it's truly fascinating. The concrete jungle, the idea of the concrete jungle is real.
Oh yeah.
100% real. And this is diving down the rabbit hole of politics and the way we're meant, whoever it is, you can say the cabal, New World Order, the whatever, but they want us to live in cities. They want us to be reliant on, the grocery store, which only has a 3-day supply of food. They want us to not, and maybe not everyone's going to agree. You can disagree if you want. This is just my perspective and my podcast, like this is, you don't have to tune in and listen if you don't want to. But this is my concept, is returning back to a primal life, homesteading.
Oh, yeah.
Dude. Talk about, you want to live, what's the meaning of life? That's a big question. What's the meaning of life? Why are we here? What's our purpose? And if you want to know your purpose, start homesteading.
That is a conversation at our dinner table more and more. Man, this world seems crazy. It seems really romantic to just go get 20 acres in the middle of nowhere and produce as much of our own food as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Teach your children, pass on that knowledge. I understand why, farmers and ranchers and all that need to have their children work the farm, because, many hands make light work. And
right.
When there's lots to do, you kind of need that extra, quote unquote child labor, get out of here. How about, in the Bible, it says, raise up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they will not depart from it. So it's like, how about let's teach them and teach them to be warrior poets, to know what love is, to know what hard work is, diligence, and to make this world a better place. Like Mahatma Gandhi says,
Yeah,
be the change you want to see in the world.
that's a great point. And even getting back to those trips, even the non-fishing part, because we don't go hunting on those trips, but I do hunt in that location, and I know the deer patterns pretty well. And so, uh, getting the people out, I get everybody up early. I'm like, all right, we're gonna go quietly based on the wind. We're gonna quietly go over here. I promise we're gonna see a dozen deer right here. And we go out there, and sure enough, everything that I've seen through time comes to be, and it's so beautiful that I can actually like bring them to that spot and see the deer, and then they see, it's springtime, so they might have like really, depending on our dates, they might actually have really small fawns with them or not, and we get to into the conversation of why some of them have the exposed nubs, and that's a freshly shed set of antlers, and talk about the entire cycle of the year. And so I bring them out there not to go hunting and all that, but using all that hunting knowledge to show them the ecosystem at work. And then the questions start flying, and everybody's, like we said earlier, everybody's a scientist and everybody wants to be back in nature. And I have yet to see a single person that I bring out and I guide through that experience that's like, whatever.
Yeah.
Every single person brings something back.
Nature is the ultimate camp high, right?
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know if you grew up going to like summer camps or church camps or
Mhm.
different stuff. Like, you come back from camp and you're like, yeah, so motivated. Like, let's do this. Let's keep this going. And then the further away from camp you get, the flame kind of burns out, and it's like
Yeah.
you kind of just get back into your old self, old ways. I think this is where hunting and being in nature, and if you can make it a lifestyle, not just a hobby, not just oh, I go every third weekend in October with my grandpa and my dad, and it's deer camp, and this is just kind of what we do. And, we go drink and we sleep in sometimes. Sometimes we get, it's like there is a time and a place for that. And if you really want to immerse yourself, treating it as a lifestyle, as a connection to nature, will truly blow your mind.
Hal Herring said it on his BHA podcast. He described it as living on the cycle. And when he said that, and it was after a preamble of talking about exactly what you're talking about. He said, "Man, there's nothing like living on the cycle." It just hit me like a sledgehammer. That's exactly distilled into one phrase: living on the cycle, living as much in tune with your natural surroundings as possible. It's so rewarding inside and out.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Uh, when you being a scientist and having that scientific brain, this goes back to kind of one of the questions I asked earlier in this episode is our biggest strengths can also be our biggest weaknesses.
Oh
And
yeah.
and so with how you view the world or how you analyze it, do you find yourself struggling with that as well because you're like, "Oh man, they should be doing this. I should know this,"
Mm,
or in
huh.
whatever avenue in which you could go with that.
No, because I think any person who's ever been a scientist understands that 90% of your experiments fail. So, like, part of trying to understand is being wrong and understanding from that why you were wrong. You weren't 100% wrong. You had a portion right, or else you would have never set off that path. But no, I think when something doesn't work out like that, it's just there must be some variable change that I didn't know. And I thought you were going down the path of does it make all of the magic kind of disappear? Knowing, thinking things through down to the atomic level. And that is something I probably did struggle with right as I started getting out into nature. And I found myself thinking about all these cascading interconnections, but it was in such a, I don't want to say clinical, but such a specific way of thinking that it took me probably a year or two to kind of release that thought process, that way of thinking, and just enjoying it. And so I think that's been part of my personal journey, where it started off as this really wonderful experiment that I saw going on, and it slowly gave way into this enriching experience.
Fascinating. I love that. Man, Kris, you're my type of dude, man. We I could have you on as a multiple guest to cover a lot of different avenues and topics, because we're going to be getting into your creation, which is Season Report, here shortly. But I feel like we're really setting the foundation as to the why, like what
Yeah.
really led you to this. And before we go there, I want to just cover this concept of like the homesteading life and the transformative power of it. How long have you been like full on? I am a hunter. Like you would classify yourself as this is who I am and what I do.
Uh, about 5, 6 years. I don't think, aside from, for 5, 6 years, I've tried to only consume meat that I've personally killed, and that obviously doesn't work all the time. Sometimes you're on a road trip and you just got to get something. I mean, I'm not a fanatic about it, but as much as possible, that's what I do. And I could count on one, definitely two hands, the number of times I've purchased meat from the store in that amount of time, 5, 6 years. And so that that has also coincided with us growing more vegetables in our garden and stuff like that. And so it's just slowly grown and grown and grown.
Do you guys have your own freeze dryer?
We don't have a freeze dryer now.
I recommend it. I really do. It's there's this brand called Harvest Right. My wife and I, we
Okay.
picked one up I think 2 years ago. Not only do I create my own freeze dried meals for like backpacking and
Mm,
hunting and all that stuff,
mm.
um, but the food preservation is so much longer, right? So,
Yeah.
instead of like a 1 year shelf life or 2 year shelf life with dehydrated, now you're making complete meals and freeze
I like
drying
that.
them, and now you have a 25-year shelf life. It's something I
Well,
highly.
thank you. I didn't have enough to do before, and now you've given me another black hole to go down. Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you, this one provides a lot of reward though,
Okay, I'll
big
have to check
time.
that out.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so, man, I'm blown away right now. This is a fun episode.
I'm having a great time.
As a podcaster, you always want to make sure the show is interesting for your guests. At the same time, I started this podcast more in the selfish realm because it's like, well, how do I gain knowledge as a hunter? How do I
Mm,
gain knowledge in the outdoors? Well, create a podcast, and you're naturally going to have an avenue to access people to have conversations,
right.
right? It's like, hey, let's talk, and they're like, okay, let's do this. Um, with that being said, your concept that you created of Season Report being a modern almanac. First off, can you explain to people who are unfamiliar? Because I feel like maybe the 20-year-olds in this world that are listening to this podcast might not actually even know what an almanac is.
Yeah, an almanac was historically. I mean, if you really want to break it down all the way, it's the oldest example of written text in humanity. Was, I think, a scrap describing yields of a particular rice or something like that. And so it's intimately part of humanity, where you are trying to predict what food is going to come to harvest when. Because getting back to our ancestors, everybody was basically on the verge of starvation. I mean,
Like all
we
the
got better
time.
and better.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you really had to know, is the crop going to fail? Because otherwise, you can get some famine, and that's catastrophic, right? And so, an almanac is a tool based on previous trends to forecast when food will be available.
I love that. So, with Season Report being a modern almanac and it being for gardening, foraging, hunting, and like covering the whole gamut of food, what's the term of food harvesting, food collecting,
Hmm.
like
Right.
like uh what is it? Take us through. Break
E-
into Season Report right now for all the listeners, and we'll dive into all the nuances.
Yeah, so I should say it's seasonreport.com, because I get that question. Is it an app? App is in development, but currently you can access it at seasonreport.com. And it is the almanac. So I guess to back up, I found that I was finding all of this information through of separate food sources. I was having to look it up every single year and go through all these websites with bloated information of personal story. I just want a number. When on my location should I plant that seed? When is muzzleloader season? And it just it dawned on me that this is a lot of wasted energy. And I was working on a coding project that kind of had one of those aha moments where I said, wait, I could a lot of the structure of this coding project I got over here, I could actually apply to this. And so I created a personalized cheat sheet, just like many of us do. And it started out very crude for just my personal benefit of 2 counties of hunting in Virginia. And they had different deer days, different bear seasons, different turkey seasons. All that information was different enough to where I found myself driving 2 hours west to go hunt in the mountains. And oh man, I misread it. I brought the wrong that happened twice, and that just infuriated me, where I could have pursued an extra animal, but I misread, or I didn't take the time to read through that whole booklet of information. And so it just it dawned on me that I shouldn't be accessing this information in such an antiquated way. And I built a prototype, and I created originally what were called reports for your season, and that's where the name comes from. And so I made it for the state of Virginia, showed it to friends, and every single person I showed it to started cussing. And they're like, "How, son of a bitch, how has this not been made yet?" Or something like that, right? And so, I mean, to a person, I was getting that kind of a response. And so that was pretty validating. And then I expanded it to Colorado and Louisiana for some in Tennessee for some friends and family. And again, getting the same responses. And this the silver lining of COVID, where you just couldn't quite go out and do as many things as you wanted because everything was closed. I hunkered down, and I was having fun building this. And so I built out half the country, tested it more thoroughly with people, was getting the same response. And then I built out the whole country for hunting only. And then it was originally just hunting. And a buddy of mine came up from Louisiana, and we went bow hunting. And we got a deer. And on the same day, we found this big, massive cluster of woods mushrooms. And that meal that evening, where we had fresh tenderloin from a deer and fresh chicken of the woods mushrooms, and they both came from the same holler, it kind of hit like a sledgehammer, where, oh, we don't need to source all of this information separately. It all needs to be here. And then the enormity of the idea started growing, and that's where I added foraging across the country and gardening. And I'm starting to add fishing, although fishing is uh, to do it right, I think requires a little bit more bandwidth than I currently have. And so it's definitely, I've got the framework in place, but fishing will be added slowly over the next few months and years.
Yeah, man, and fishing, there's so much to it.
There is, and I think I would rather do it right than do it hastily, and that's why I only have mostly coastal states at the moment, because it was such a unique challenge to tackle with both saltwater and freshwater, because those seasons, freshwater fish is basically year round. Here's your limit, and here's your size limit. But saltwater it's its own thing. As you know, living on the Pacific, you have I never realized how I've actually never went saltwater fishing before, but getting into those regulations, it's eye opening how complex those are for all the different types of fish and crustaceans that you can catch and trap.
Awesome. So let's break it down category by category right now, so you can really give an explanation of why somebody would want to sign up for your season report. And we'll go backwards, and we'll do hunting at the end. So
Okay.
let's start with gardening,
Yeah.
which if we're into the homestead lifestyle, or you've been wanting to get into gardening, because a lot of people are like, dude, I would love to grow my own fruit, or it's growing zucchini or squash is probably like one of the most easiest
Oh my gosh.
things to ever grow
Yeah.
in the world, and it just kind of takes care of itself. Like, it's a
Yep.
great one to start with. Um, break down gardening and like what we can expect on season report from there.
Yeah. So, I'm getting better at describing this as a thing because I think you hit the nail on that. What is it? And so, if you go to seasonreport.com and sign up for all these different food sources, you'll have a personalized dashboard that gives you a calendar view of all of your different food sources that you can pursue. And it's all in one screen. And so that's the goal. I want your entire personally sourced pantry that you actually care about accessible within a click. And then if you want to go deeper, you can add and customize as needed. But gardening, it's going to tell you based on your location when you should sow your seeds, when you should transplant or move them from indoor to outdoor, when you should expect a long-term growth phase, and when you should expect your harvest. And so typically, if you look on the back of the seed packet, it's just going to tell you when to plant, with very very broad strokes on when you should plant, and then expected harvest 65 to 70 days or something like that. I break down each of those little spots: so sowing seeds, transplanting, growing, harvesting, along with links to much more in-depth um, resources for you to learn more if you want. And then just 2 tips for each. Just I want quick and easy so you can spend more time actually planting that garden with your kids, or going out hunting with your dad, and not having to be on your phone looking at all this stuff. It's kind of ironic. I'm creating something online that I want you to be on your phone less with, but I just want to create a tool that simplifies all that homework.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could publish it year by year and actually have it be an almanac if you wanted to, but then, that's its own beast, and
Right.
doesn't necessarily go with the way of the modern world at the time. So I get that. So one of the interesting things is, and here's some personal perspective and experience, because experiences and perspective comes with experience, and experience always trumps opinion. People have opinions.
Yep.
Not everyone has experiences and a true perspective. So here I am from the state of Washington, northern part of the United States, Pacific Northwest, rainy. We get beautiful summers. All of our harvests, typically, for a majority of what we grow up there, comes in the summer and in the fall. You know,
Very very
very
small.
very small window. Unless you want to grow kale or stuff like that, that's going to
Hmm.
produce throughout the winter. Well, we sold our house at the end of March, and on our way down to Texas, we laid over in Arizona for 2.5 months. And it was April, beginning April, end of March, and I'm in Arizona in a place I've never lived. And at this Airbnb in the backyard was this tree that I've never seen before, and it had fruit on it. And it kind of, and I'm in Arizona, so it's already like 85 degrees in early springtime,
Right.
and I'm like, what? It was a grapefruit tree. Blew
Okay.
blew my mind. I'm like, here I am eating fresh fruit off of a tree
Yeah.
in March and April, rather than like, apples and pears and all this stuff's not going to be available until August, September, in that time frame back in the state of Washington where I'm from. And as I started communicating with other people, they're like, yeah, Arizona actually has 2 harvest seasons because of the way that
Yep.
it is. And I was like, fascinating, just like
Yeah.
blew my mind. And so getting into this idea, like, I want to go full on homestead. That
Yeah.
would be my goal. Financially, you have to be able to get to a point where you can get all your ducks in a row before you can truly go down that hole. Um, and I'm not there yet, but eventually I would say I have my land. Now I just need to get everything else going so that we can we can go do this.
Yeah.
So we get to Texas, and the town that we live in has a peach festival. I
Yeah.
love peaches. And
That's
so
a southern thing.
yeah, and so I'm like, all right, every peach that we eat, I'm like, boys, let's keep those pits. And they're like, what? I was like, yeah, I'm gonna show you. And so I would always germinate seeds in a little Ziploc bag with a wet paper towel up in Washington, but a lot of the times it was peas, sugar snap peas. Just
Right.
get them going, get them popping, and then plant them in the ground. So I cracked open the pit of the peach, and I get the seeds, and then I've never done this before personally, but so I put them in the bag, and they weren't growing. So then I opened the bag up after a couple days and scraped off the outside like brown layer to it to actually expose the seed. And all of a
Hmm.
sudden they started germinating, and I have little like 4 or 5 little Dixie cups right now with tiny little peach sprouts. Now,
Nice.
I don't know because I haven't done my research, and this is why I need season report, is I actually don't know when is a good time to actually start the germination process of these peach trees, because I would love to get them to a point where we're planting them in the yard.
Yeah.
And right now they're in a Dixie cup, and I'm like, okay, what are we gonna do?
I think you broached on one of the more interesting parts of the gardening, because if it's really cold, it's very straightforward. If it's basically all the way down to southern border states, it's pretty seasonal. And what's been really interesting is I never realized that several states have two growing seasons, especially for vegetables. And so as I'm putting this stuff in, and if you look through my database across the country, you'll find that there are those two growing seasons for a lot of things. And citrus has been, with oranges especially, has been really interesting, where I'm learning a lot more. It's seasonal where it's colder, but as you get closer to the equator, that seasonality becomes much less important from the research I've been doing. And you can have these long fruiting times, particularly with citrus, that I found where that seasonality kind of goes out the window. And I would have never known that had I not started actually constructing this database across the country. And it gets back to what I've learned a tremendous amount. You said you started your podcast both as a altruistic educational tool, but also selfishly to learn a lot more. And I'm the same way with Season Report. I want a lot of people to get a lot out of it, but man, I'm having a blast learning all these different intricacies of food across the country.
Yeah. So if I go on to season report and take a look at peaches and peach seeds, the information is going to be there onto when to go through that process of inside to outside and planting it and all that, or what am I going to expect for the gardening side of that?
Yes, you will. Sowing seeds indoors, transplanting. I give a little tips on, put them in the sun for about 2 hours a day during this particular time, and that will harden them up to get full sun, stuff like that.
Dude, so cool. Man. All right. After this podcast, I'm going to quickly run over to grab my Dixie cups and go set them outside so that
Do a little bit more research before you just throw them out before the winter.
right. Ain't that the truth? Okay, so that's gardening. Fascinating. What are some of the top growing fruits or vegetables like across America in general that you could say, like, if someone's not a green thumb in your process of learning, that is a great place to start?
Oh, squash, zucchini, tomatoes, peppers, the stuff that Lowe's or Home Depot have. There's a reason why they've invested so much money into putting those in their stores, right? They're pretty, as long as you pay attention to when, they're pretty self-sustaining.
Yeah. I was a former middle school teacher, and I remember at the end of the school year one year, the science teachers, they were doing, I don't know, maybe it was biology or chemistry or whatever it was, did little corn sprouts
Hmm.
with kids in little tiny cups, and a bunch of students on the last day of school left their cups like at the assembly or whatever. And being the PE teacher,
What?
it's in
I
it's
don't
in
believe that.
right, dude. They lost stuff. What, are you kidding me?
What? No.
So I was like, hey man, I like to garden. They're already sprouted. Like, I'm taking them. And so this was in in Washington, school gets out like June 20th, like somewhere between June 17th to June 22nd is right
Yeah.
around the end of the school year for us. And so I bring it home. This thing's probably like 2 or 3 inches tall in this cup. I plant it, and my garden was like just a little corner of my yard where I ended up just digging out weeds and cutting down a bush just so I could plant some zucchini, some strawberries, some peas, and I had 3 stalks of corn. And I remember being like, "Oh man, I'm going to plant these." And one of my coworkers was like, "Yep, you got to get started. You're a little behind." And I was like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "Knee high by the 4th of
Yeah.
July." And I was like,
Yep.
"I've never heard that before." Like
Yeah.
it blew my mind.
And then you hear it everywhere, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and so I think corn is an interesting thing that's in there. You know, one of the unique challenges getting to peach and citrus and apples. Uh, my database is really good at seasonal fruit and vegetables, but I have in there with these trees that take, years to develop. That's been an interesting challenge on how to convey this information because you really have two things. You have starting and then you have the years afterward for production. And so how do I deliver the most information to the most number of people to where it's usable for those particular things, where it doesn't fit cleanly within 1 year? And so that's just another interesting challenge that I've been getting feedback from multiple people, yourself included, where all right, I could probably shape this a little bit more in this direction and constantly making it a better service.
Fascinating. Love it. All right, let's move into foraging.
Yeah,
Shrooms, mushrooms. You know, the something that as you are a hunter, the more you're afield and the more you're in tune with nature and looking around, you're gonna start finding things a lot more that you would never notice. And
certainly.
that really helped happen with me. Turns out every time I go hunting, I'm finding morel mushrooms. Now, even to the point where in September I found two burnt out morels still, and I was
Wow.
like, "No way, man! I can't believe it's like mid to late September and I found two mushrooms,
Yeah.
still holding on. I did not take them home; they looked nasty, but I could identify what they were. Um, talk about foraging. Take us through this.
Yeah. So foraging, this was largely, as I told you, the chicken of the woods mushrooms, motivated by that. But when I lived in Louisiana, I took for granted that muscadine grapes grew everywhere, and to the point where we would just depend on them being available in the woods late summer to fall. And so I wasn't hunting that much, but I was really into golf at that point of my life. And so between holes, we were walking through the woods and kind of close to nature all the time. And you didn't even have to pack snacks because there were always some satsumas or muscadines just wildly growing, and you could pluck them off and get a completely full belly from them. And so as I started branching into more and more diverse food sources, mushrooms, berries, pawpaw fruit is a native fruit to the Americas. That all these different things, cherries up in the Northeast, all these different forageable foods. There's so much that you can just go take a walk and eat.
I didn't even know what pawpaw fruit was until COVID-19, where like the South African president, or oh, I forget what country, was like, "Yeah, pawpaw tested positive for COVID-19." Did you remember
Oh
hearing that?
no, I didn't know.
Okay. And I was like, "A pawpaw fruit? I've never heard of that." And then fellow podcaster Lucas Oswald from the Publicly Challenged podcast,
Yeah,
he was like, "Yeah, man, pawpaw fruit's native to North America in certain regions." And I was like, "You guys are blowing my minds right now. Come on now, what's happening here?" Um, when we're talking foraging, we're not just talking mushrooms. We're talking about just what is naturally growing in your environment in which you are in. For example,
mhm,
state of Washington, I'm a huge black bear hunter. Find the berries, find the bears. You're hunting in berry patches, blackberries,
yep,
huckleberries, all that. Now, those are the ones you're going to eat. You can eat elderberry, um, but I would say process it down and
right.
you know get the juice or the or what would you call what do you call that, the end result after you process it down?
It depends. I mean, juice depends on if you add sugar. Would it be a syrup?
Yeah, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
um so you have all these during bear season. I guess I never even thought about that. I think I always think of foraging as mushrooms.
Yeah, and that's been part of the personal education where I have I use season report every time I go out in the woods, and so I check what's available. I actually was, just had a baby daughter, very busy at home, but I had family come in and they said, "Hey, look, we want to give you the opportunity to just go hunt at least one evening. Get out there and enjoy." And I took them up on it. It was so good, but I hadn't been in the hunting mindset at all, and so I just Okay, let me just double check and see what I should be looking for. And because it was all there on my personal dashboard, I'm like, oh yeah, chicken in the woods. It's that time of year. And so because that was presented to me quickly and easily, I actually saw some chicken in the woods growing when I went out deer hunting. Now I didn't get anything, and the mushrooms are a little early, but I'll be returning in a week or two because they're going to be. I marked them on my GPS, and they're going to be nice and plump pretty soon.
Is mushrooms specifically? Is it always after a rain, or is it more just in general? Like,
So
eh,
you're going to see a lot of growth after a rain, but even during the driest periods, you can go in the woods and find those little hollows where there's moisture, and that's typically where you're going to find more mushrooms with those areas that retain moisture for a long period of time.
yeah, okay, awesome. What has gotten the most traction on Season Report? Is it the hunting aspect, or are people really like clinging to the foraging side of it?
Hunting first and foremost, but I've been pretty shocked at how much people are enjoying the foraging part because there's really nothing there's ways to access this information, but nobody's put it together as this kind of really quick, easy to use database like this. And so that's been really cool hearing all these people talk about getting out in the woods foraging and for all these different types of things.
Yeah, I've found that the foraging communities are very strong. Like
Yes.
they're like hungry for the information.
Yeah.
Um, so that's awesome to hear. All right, so anything else you want to toss in about foraging before we move on to the anchor of Season Report for you?
I think foraging is has been personally something that I've used to go out in the woods more, especially during springtime and summertime. And if you are a hunter or just somebody that wants to go and forage, but especially if you're a hunter, it's not like you are wasting. I don't view getting out in the woods as any type of a negative. When you talk to some hunters and they're like, "Oh, you can't go into the woods in your spot between these times, or you're going to run the deer off and stuff like that." Maybe, but I would argue that if you're going to go out and look for those food sources that the deer depend on as well, you're probably going to do yourself more good than you are harm by going out and finding these new patches of food, and probably going to lead you to more areas where deer go and turkey go that you didn't previously know about, and then also kind of getting broadening that year long perspective of where do the animals go at this time of year versus the winter versus the summer. And I mean, springtime foraging goes hand in hand with shed hunting too. So in the last 2 years since I've created this, I no longer view getting out in the woods for hunting as a fall only event. It is truly a year long event in my household at this point.
Fascinating. Okay. Man, I love it. I'm going to dive into your season report. So I'm going to be giving a seminar at the Western Hunt Expo on black bear hunting 101. I did one
Oh
last
yeah,
year, and I'm going to do
yeah,
one again. And I believe I might have to really incorporate your season report into my seminar talk because, you know, people, depending on what state you come from, the concept of berries looks different in each state. And,
right.
acorns are a huge food source, not just for deer, but also for bears. And,
Yes,
and so like understanding that, okay, what does a tree look like that produces acorns?
right.
Right? Like what is an actual, like what we consider berries, like the plump, juicy, squishy stuff that we buy at a market doesn't always equate to the berries that bears are eating out
Exactly,
out in the field.
exactly.
So identifying all those and showing them how to get this, I might actually push a lot of people
Oh,
towards your website and
love to hear it.
get them signed up. Okay, so um, I'm on Season Report right now. I just logged in. I'm going through this as a new user. I pulled up the state of Utah. So
Hmm.
it says search your database as you see fit. So I'm going to go to the state of Utah, and I'm going to collect species black bear.
Hmm.
And then it says tools. I want to go any method, but I don't really. Um, if you just leave it blank if you want to go any method,
Mm,
and then
yep.
leave it blank for any date,
Yep.
and then you hit submit. Ah, okay. I see. It says subscribe. I should have done this before we
Oh,
recorded. Man,
so
t-
yeah, so I have the way I had this set up is you can go individual pursuits. You can go search Utah. You can choose the particular area you want and see everything available. So on your free trial, you can see, and I hooked you up with a premium account, so you'll be able to do everything you want. But uh, the Discover tool that you were looking at, that is something that searches nationwide all in one. So you wouldn't even have to go and search Utah like that. You could search, I want to hunt a black bear with a bow, and I would like to do it in this time frame. It'll tell you across the nation which states fulfill that search query. But that's such a powerful tool. I keep that one behind the subscription, and so that's kind of my carrot dangling to try to encourage people to join up.
have you incorporated tag prices?
I have not. I have not.
Is that something that is on the horizon or not? Because that would be really cool, like understanding if you have all this type of information in this database, it's like, okay, what offers over the counter and who offers what price?
So, it's funny you ask that. There are a million. I mean, you can appreciate there's a million different ways this can go, and I did start to talk. I did play around with tags for a period of time, but I really found that I was recreating the bloat that I was trying to solve. And
Ah,
so, in that early, probably half the country, when I was testing it out with different people, I started noticing and I started getting a lot more people saying, "Wait, I don't understand this part," because I was putting so much information in. And so that's where I want to couch this, or I want to present this really as an almanac. This is a hub for information that you're going to look up in the moment, but it's not going to be the repository for everything you ever need. And that's why I have links to the appropriate resources, the fishing game department, to go and do a little bit more research. Obviously, know all of your legalities that you need to follow, but that's where you can access that more information. But tag prices, value hunts, that's certainly something on the to-do list. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Moving from the state of Washington to Texas and even going through Arizona, my hunting journey has been so short as of yet. I took my hunter safety 8 years ago. So I've only been in the game for a very short amount of time. And at that time, for the longest time, it was like, I just want to kill an animal. And
Yep.
it took me so many years to even hit that mark. And then so many years to be like, I want to feel like I know what I'm doing as a hunter, where I'm
Mhm.
actually seeing my query every time I go out. And now it's like, okay, I've killed some animals in my home state. Well, now what else is out there? And so I'm starting to explore, and moving states also is like, okay, well, public land's kind of hard to find in Texas. It's there, it's huntable, you can do it. There's a lot of different restrictions. So, what else is there within driving distance? Yeah,
Right.
Oklahoma. We go out to New Mexico. There's a lot of different places that I go check out, and that's a lot of information to have to dive in. It's like, where do I start?
It's so much information, and I would put Louisiana on your list as well. It is a sportsman's paradise. I got friends and family there galore. So, you're in a very fertile area, and I have plenty of friends that go and do that. I mean, even within Texas, just thinking back to the structure of their regulations, you have large zones that determine your limit. And so that's information that I provide really readily accessible. What's your daily limit? What's your season limit? And those are the things that even within a state as massive as Texas or as small as Virginia, you really have to follow these county by county or game management zone by game management zone rules. And so that is part of the information that I do present to you so you can get that information quickly. And, a way to think about this is I got a bear last year with my bow, and I went out on the opening day of deer season, and I wasn't even think. I always get my bear tag just in case, I had this bear tag saved for a particular monster that I've seen for the last few years out west, but that one doesn't start until late. And so it wasn't I would have missed this opportunity entirely had I not pulled up season report just to make sure, like a lot of people, all right, it is the date. I'm not going to go be hunting on an off date. All right, it is the date. Oh, yeah, I forgot, it is black bear season here too. Didn't even really think about it. I didn't expect to see a bear, but then that first day of deer bow season, a black bear comes up, and this guy was not, he was kind of a little too interested in me when I tried to scare him off because I wanted a deer that day. He just looked at me and kind of kept walking closer. I was like, oh my God. All right, well, this is going to be a different situation. And so, because that information was so readily accessible and reminded me without me having to go look it up, I knew I had the tag. I knew I was a legal date. So I was able to take that bear without any second guessing or having to look up the dates in the moment and miss that opportunity. And I'm still eating on that guy a year later.
Dude, awesome. I love black bears. They're my jam, man. It's the
I
best.
really enjoy them. Yeah.
It is the best. And I totally forgot you said Louisiana, but now I got Arkansas also, the home of Bear Hunting Magazine. So, yeah. So, dude, Kris, this has been a great episode, brother. I've really appreciated this.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
I think what you said, talking to teachers is interesting. I've had a few podcasts where that's former teachers talking, and I think there's that perspective of kind of like what you hit off on the beginning. You operate in the now, and you go hunting and foraging and gardening and all that, but you're undeniably thinking about the future and the heritage and propagating this forward, especially in what I would kind of argue is we're trending away from hunting as a society. And I think every little bit you can do to bring people to the fold and appreciate that engagement with nature is just going to keep a healthier, more informed ecosystem and people trying to protect those wilderness areas.
Totally. Yeah. And so we're creatures of habit, but we're social creatures. And what brings people together? Food. Food comes from experiences. You can collect it as a group. You can collect it solo. There's a story that goes along with it. There's so much that is tied into what I call primal adventure. And that is why it's so important. And then with that being said is, the quote of Mahatma Gandhi of be the change you want to see in this world is well, what do you want to create in this world? What do you want to leave in this world? What's your legacy? If people don't want to have children, totally get it. At the same time, what are you leaving for others? Or are you just going to be a consumer the entire time? Right? And it's just this is mine, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine, rather than the idea, I'm a believer in Jesus and God and this concept of love, right? Love is giving.
Yeah.
Love, and it's a two-way street, right? You have to be able to receive someone's love at the same time as be able to give somebody love. You also have to be able to love yourself before you can receive the love of others. And so with that, my mission of mentorship is conservation. Ultimately, is just my legacy to this world of love. Mentorship is just loving somebody else. And I love what you're doing with Season Report is whether or not you know it or not, or you've viewed it in this world, is Season Report is your gift to this world, to hunters, to the people who want to better themselves in this life. And whether or not you're charging for it is besides the point. We still have to make a living, and not everything is free. Everything has a cost in this life, such as the secular fashion that you talked about. If you want to exercise, you want to lose weight or gain weight or whatever, there's a cost to everything. And so I love it. Beautiful story,
and with
brother.
The cost, I appreciate those words, those kind words. I really appreciate it. And with the cost, it's only $15 a year. That's the cheapest hunting tool that you can find. But I set that price point very accessible for everybody. You get a 2-week free trial. So, I'm sure plenty of people will just sign up and create their dashboard for the stuff that they know, not necessarily the Discover thing that you were playing with. But you're going to get a lot of utility, and I'm sure people will use it and maybe create a new account, and someone call it abuse that system. But I want this to be something that helps as many people. And there's always different partnerships that I'm working with. I have a partnership with Howl for Wildlife, and I think it's a very sensible partnership because I provide all the tools you need to, or all the informational tools that you need to really get out and source your own food. And Howl for Wildlife has created an innovative way to protect your ability to do so. And so I got a partnership with them, with Pope and Young. And so if you don't want to pay the $15 membership, use a code Howl or Pope Young, and your membership cost is dropped down to only $10. And I send 50% of that towards those conservation agencies, because what I'm really trying to do is create a tool that is self-sustaining. It costs money to run this, right? But by creating this tool that is self-sustaining, and it can grow and bring different participants of the ecosystem together, we can really start to all come together over the dinner table and focus on what's important, like retaining those wilderness areas and preventing expansion into the winter range of this organism and stuff like that. And I think at the end of the day, I would like nothing more than a hunter meeting a non-hunter and vice versa, and them sharing all their knowledge between the same ecosystem and just learn and grow between one another, and then understand and appreciate threats to that ecosystem and respond appropriately.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I love this. You've created a tool that reaches both sides, if we want to talk about it in that regards, which is
that's the by design. That's the goal.
Powerful. Closing remarks. If people have questions or want to provide feedback or like connect with you to get a better understanding of how they can use Season Report for their own good, how do they go about that?
Yeah, so my email is on the website. It's seasonreport.com. My email is on there at chris@seasonreport.com. On Instagram and Facebook, our handle is at my season report. I couldn't get Season Report because it is a European luxury handbag company, and I couldn't get just Season Report, so I had to add the my on the social media. But yeah, it's seasonreport.com. Feel free to email me or reach out on social media.
Awesome. I love it, brother. Kris, thank you so much for coming on, being a guest here on the Soul Seekers podcast. Everybody, if you like this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to it. Also, leave a review, as it really helps promote everything that we're doing here with mentorship as conservation. Those of you, I have not really let the cat out of the bag yet, but if those of you who are looking for something fun to do, Saturday, December 10th in the state of Washington, Mukilteo, Washington, Soul Seekers is putting on an event, a community event to bring people together. And we are doing silent auctions and raffles and raising money for the nonprofit Blood Origins. And Robbie Kroger of Blood Origins is actually going to be in the house, and he's going to be conveying the truth about hunting, all under the mission of mentorship as conservation. And Kris has been just an awesome person and said that he's going to be donating some Season Report memberships for people that are showing up. So, come get involved, come get connected, come get plugged in, and let's make this world a better place as we make ourselves better people. Because at the end of the day, like Stephen Covey says, you got to sharpen your own saw. It's time to sharpen your saw. And in Book of Proverbs in the Bible, iron sharpens iron, so the countenance of one friend to another. So very important, everybody. Be blessed. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. I hope you loved it. I hope you got a lot out of it. You're inspired, you're motivated, and you're ready to just make this world a better place. I'm Johnny Mack, everybody. Freedom on, and stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast and want to support the show, you can always like, share, subscribe, and leave a rating, as it helps us share our mission of mentorship as conservation. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of Soul Seekers Nation as we transform lives through primal adventure. If you want to get more connected with the podcast, check out the Soul Seekers Nation Facebook group. as I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. So stay tuned and stay soulful.